I'm a beta. After faking my medical report and pretending to be an omega, I rushed overnight to the house of that supposedly frail, bedridden alpha benefactor. But when I saw him, he wasn't old at all. He was young, and built like he could knock me out with a single punch. Half a month of sleepless nights and relentless duties later, I couldn't take it anymore and confessed everything. I'm actually a beta. A beta. I can't have kids. Beta? I nodded like my life depended on it. When he heard my confession, the corners of his lips lifted slightly. He caught my wrists and pinned them above my head. If that's the case, he murmured, then we'll just have to work a little harder, won't we? My cousin had introduced me to this job, to carry on the family line for a lonely, ailing alpha. They'd said the alpha was old and weak, stuck in bed, and his only wish was to have a child to inherit his fortune. I didn't even think twice. I grabbed the fake report and went straight there overnight. But the truth is, I'm a beta. The biggest difference between betas and omegas is simple. Omegas can bear children. Betas couldn't lay an egg even if someone tried to hammer it out of them. Still, I forged the report and went anyway. After all, who says no to money? And it wasn't like the guy was supposed to even be able to get out of bed. Easy money, right? The address led me to a high-end villa neighborhood. The butler took me straight up to the 3rd floor. As we walked down the hallway, I couldn't help admiring the decor. The last time I'd been inside a house like this was over a decade ago. Clearly, this sponsor was even richer than I'd imagined. While I was still gaping, the butler opened the door to a study. Sir. The man lowered the file in his hand, lifting his head toward me. A sharp, handsome face with flawless bone structure. Ethan, right? My gaze swept over his face, then lingered on those broad shoulders, the defined fingers, and finally returned to his striking features. Wait, wasn't the benefactor supposed to be an old man with one foot in the grave? Wasn't he supposed to struggle just to sit up? Wasn't he supposed to be half a breath away from dying? I froze on the spot, my voice coming out tentative. Mr. Lucas? He nodded. That's me. Lucas didn't notice my expression. Do you remember me? Panic set in as I frantically flipped through my memories. Back when I was scavenging trash. Nope, never saw someone this good looking. Washing dishes? No. Delivering food? Definitely not. Nothing came up. I shook my head honestly. Never seen you. Lucas lowered his eyes, responding softly, I see. I don't know why, but the moment I said that, I could feel his mood drop. I didn't have time to dwell on it though. I quickly asked if I could step out to make a call. The moment I left the room, I hid in a corner and dialed my cousin. Uncle, what the hell is going on? This guy's supposed to be sickly. He's young. He's built like a tank, okay? My uncle's voice wavered. I don't know either. I swear the person I spoke to was definitely an old man. I might have forgotten to ask about his age. The worst part, I'd assumed he was ancient. When it came time to fulfill the contract, I figured I could slack off and bluff my way through it. But now, there's no way in hell I can fake my way out of this. Why don't you just bear with it? The down payment alone is over $1 million. That's enough to clear all the family debt. And think about it, if he were a perfectly healthy, rich alpha, why would he settle for some random omega? There's gotta be something wrong with him. Don't worry, when the time's right, I'll help you get out. Easy for him to say. Let's see him be the one getting pinned down. I forced down my frustration, thinking about that pile of money. Fine. The study door was half open when I returned. I heard the butler speaking with Lucas. Sir, when I brought this gentleman in earlier, I noticed the way he walked was rather unnatural. For the sake of your future child's genetic health, should we schedule another physical exam? My heart skipped a beat. Any omega with health problems would be rejected immediately. The first requirement on the contract was, physically healthy, no hidden conditions. I burst through the door. I'm not sick. I strode across the room, bypassed the desk, and stood right beside Lucas. I hooked 2 thin straps at my waist with my fingers and yanked them upward. See? It's just these stupid straps. They're uncomfortable. That's why I walked weird. I'm perfectly fine. Originally, I thought those straps my uncle made me wear were to strangle the benefactor in case of an emergency. Turns out, they had another kind of effect. Lucas's calm expression slowly flushed red. Even the backs of his hands were pink. He lifted a hand, pressing his fingers against his temple, then pulled a sheet of paper from the stack of files. It was a contract. Every duty and payment was clearly listed. If you have no objections, sign it. I read it carefully. No traps. The moment I put the pen down, Lucas moved closer. His hands started exploring, like he was trying to verify something. He dipped his head, inhaling against my skin. Of course, as a beta, there was nothing for him to smell. To cover it up, I whispered, I used an inhibitor before coming. Lucas didn't answer, just made a low sound and wrapped his arms around me. He lifted me off the ground effortlessly. My feet flailed helplessly in the air. I swallowed the urge to punch him in the face and tried to stay still. Even if I wanted to resist, it wouldn't have mattered. Lucas was strong, one arm locked tightly around my waist, the other slid past my underarm and pressed down on my collarbone. Other than my legs kicking uselessly, I couldn't move at all. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, nuzzling and mouthing at my skin, leaving it damp. It reminded me a little of those two dumb dogs back home. Thinking of him as a big dog somehow made it less unbearable. But soon, I realized, Lucas was far scarier than any dog. Because unlike them, he could actually bite the one he wanted. The butler must have slipped out at some point. Because the moment I came back to my senses, only Lucas and I were left alone in the vast study. I thought whatever was about to happen would take place right there, on his massive desk. But Lucas surprised me. He pushed open a hidden door on the side, and behind it was a bedroom with a king-sized bed. Without a word, he tossed me onto the mattress, then slowly started undoing the buttons on his shirt. Wanting to get it over with as quickly as possible, I began taking off my own clothes too. When Lucas saw that, his movements sped up immediately. By the end, he just yanked his shirt open, buttons scattering across the room. I recognized that brand. Those shirts were expensive. Even the buttons alone were worth a small fortune. Following the trail of flying buttons, I turned over, kneeling on the bed to look for them. Just as I grabbed one between my fingers, heat rushed up behind me. And in that instant, it truly hit me. What was about to happen? I forced myself to stay calm, trying to bring Lucas back to some semblance of reason. Boss, I don't have any experience. Can you go easy on me? At my words, Lucas's breathing grew heavier. Don't worry, he said quietly, I won't hurt you. I nodded. That made sense. No matter what, it couldn't be worse than pulling a 14-hour shift without a break. The mattress was soft, but with Lucas pressing down on me, every time I tried to move, he'd just pull me back in. He was solid, like a boulder, and I couldn't escape the weight of him. I felt like a piece of mochi being squashed and kneaded into strange shapes, only to be devoured afterward. My thoughts drifted for a second. Then Lucas started biting again. I couldn't take it anymore and reached back to pinch him. Just a little warning. Lucas froze. His expression flickered, something raw and sharp in his eyes. I quickly pushed at his chest. Can we take a break? My back's not great. Okay. He flipped us over, but didn't stop moving. This way will be better, he murmured against my ear. When it was finally over, I dragged myself into the shower, then collapsed onto the bed, wrapped up in a blanket. I didn't even have the strength to lift a finger. Behind me, Lucas didn't lie down. He was rummaging through a drawer for something. Suddenly, something cold pressed against my skin. I shivered hard and slapped a hand down in panic. Boss? For the bruises, he answered, calm and steady, as if nothing intimate had happened at all. His clear, matter-of-fact tone made my guard lower a little. Still, the idea of letting the sponsor himself take care of me felt wrong. I'd lied about who I was, and now he was tending to me. My guilt was eating me alive. I can do it myself. Lucas gently moved my hand away. I'll do it. He wasn't going to back down, so I gave up and just held still, helping him by shifting my position a little. I'll hold it for you. Go ahead. If he was already going this far, I couldn't just lie there like dead weight. But instead of cold, the ointment spread like a gentle wave of warmth. Then his voice came, low against my back. Let's go again. When I woke up the next day, Lucas was already gone. The scent of food drifted down the hallway. I clutched my sore waist and shuffled toward the dining room. The table was already set with lunch. Any one of those dishes was something I normally couldn't afford. I sat down and started eating, sneaking a look at the messages from my uncle. Ethan, remember, don't give yourself away. You need to look like you're drawn to his pheromones. At those words, my backside started to ache all over again. I say, does it have to be every day? Uncles say, of course, every day is best. That guy's a high-quality alpha. To an omega, his pheromones are like money to you. When he put it that way, I kind of understood. Just bear with it. Be a little more enthusiastic. For the money. Suddenly, the food in my mouth didn't taste so good anymore. Lucas came home just in time for dinner. He set down his coat and bag, unfastened his watch, and his eyes never left me the entire time. His gaze burned against my skin, making every bite in my mouth taste wrong. How's your body feeling? He asked. How does it feel? Why don't you try it yourself and see? The words burned in my throat, but all I managed to show was a shy, awkward smile. Thank you. I'm fine. Lucas nodded and reached across the table to serve me some food. All evening, he kept an eye on me, on what I liked to eat, what I didn't. At first, I thought he was just paying attention to my stomach, but his care wasn't a one-time thing. It became a habit. Breakfast, dinner, asking about my day, small gifts whenever he came home from work. And little by little, it started to feel, almost like we were dating. Several days passed like that. Then, looking at his handsome face so close to mine, I suddenly remembered my uncle's instructions. Act like you're drawn to him. That was the key. I didn't bother with fake shy looks. I just asked him straight, "Are we doing it again tonight?" Lucas's breath hitched. Yes, he answered without hesitation. Then, without missing a beat, he picked me, and the plate in front of me, right up. Good. We'll finish the rest upstairs. Lucas had to have some dog blood in him. I'd never met anyone who could bite this much. There wasn't a single inch of me left untouched. Just the sight of him opening his mouth was enough to make me tense up. Half dazed from exhaustion, my mind even drifted to my uncle. He was well over 50 now, but still looked good for his age. I actually wondered, briefly, if I should introduce him to Lucas. That thought didn't last long. Lucas quickly made sure of that. The following days blurred together. If I gave even the slightest hint of closeness, Lucas would drag me straight back to the bedroom. Like a machine. Work during the day, pin me down at night. But he'd learned from the first time. His control was better now, precise even. No more accidents, no more bruising that could get me a sick day. Even when I begged for a day off, he wouldn't let me sleep alone. Even in the dark, I could feel the heat of his gaze on me, and the arm around my waist, ready to pull me back in. That night, I tossed and turned, trapped under the weight of that presence. When I finally wriggled out of his arms in the dead of night, I crawled under the bed like some fugitive. But come morning, I still woke up to Lucas's mouth on my skin. At some point, he'd fished me out from under the bed like I'd never left. He grabbed my hand, pressed it down, and bit my lips softly. "Break time's over," he whispered. "Half a month of this." I finally snapped. I shoved his weight off me, panting. "I'm actually a beta." The creaking of the wooden frame went dead silent. Only Lucas's rough breathing filled the air. He lifted himself up, his eyes fixing on my trembling hands. "Beta?" I nodded frantically. "I'm a beta. I can't have children. I'm sorry for lying to you." For a heartbeat, I thought he'd stop. But instead, Lucas's lips curved, and he caught my wrists, pinning them above my head again. "If that's the case," he said slowly, "then we'll just have to work a little harder, won't we?" Lucas didn't look shocked. He didn't look angry, either. Instead, after hearing what I said, he seemed even more excited. He didn't let me go until I couldn't even make a sound anymore. Then, just like nothing had happened, he pulled me into his arms and fell asleep in the same spot. The next morning, I sent a message to my uncle to explain what happened. The chat window stayed quiet for a long time before a new message finally popped up. "Uncle say, he probably thought you were joking. Relax, Ethan. You're just too nervous. The debt's already paid off. I've been checking out new rentals. I'll let you know once everything's ready." Then he sent me a novel. He told me to read it, to learn something from it. The story was about a little Omega whose situation was similar to mine. He endured the Alpha's attention every night, and during the day, he even helped the housekeeper clean the villa. Every time he saw the Alpha, he would panic and try to avoid him, but somehow, it always backfired. I couldn't relate to that Omega at all. He went through something that intense, and the next morning, instead of taking it easy, he actually got up to help clean the house. Fuming, I slammed the book shut and told the housekeeper to bring my lunch to my room. Lying in bed for too long gets boring, but walking for too long made my waist ache again. After some back and forth in my head, I pushed open Lucas's study door, planning to find a book to read. His computer was still on. A few foreign language documents were left open on the screen. Bored, I started translating them using his computer. When you're focused, time flies. By the time I came back to myself, it was already evening. The lights in the room were still off, and at some point Lucas had come in. He was standing right next to me, like he'd been waiting for a while. "Sorry," I blurted out. I stood up quickly. I was just bored, so I translated a little. Lucas took the mouse from me and scrolled through the files on the screen. After checking everything, his gaze held a hint of approval. "These 3 spots are wrong. Everything else is perfect," he said. Lucas patiently explained each mistake to me. Listening to his voice, I suddenly felt dazed. For a second, it was like I was back in my childhood. My language teacher used to correct my errors the same way. But after the bankruptcy, I'd returned home to finish high school, and eventually, I couldn't even afford college. "Have you ever thought about working at my company?" he asked casually. "The pay I can offer you will be better than anywhere else." I hesitated. With only a high school diploma, my resume usually got rejected before it even reached the interview stage. But if I stayed here, this entire act would eventually fall apart. And when that happened, it wouldn't just be about paying off a debt anymore. A shiver ran down my spine. I quickly changed the subject. I think we should focus on what needs to be done first. We can talk about the rest later. You're right, Lucas said with a nod. At some point, his arm had slipped around my waist. Come on. Lucas's overwhelming presence made me start avoiding him. I tried to eat and rest at different times just to keep some distance. But it didn't work. Even when I hid in one of the far guest rooms at night, Lucas would still find me in his sleep, pull me back into his arms, and hold me there like I was something soft he refused to let go of. Realizing avoidance was useless, I switched tactics. I started acting clingy, pretending I'd fallen for him, hoping he'd eventually get tired of me. But that backfired, too. Once Lucas noticed I'd become more attached, not only did he not get annoyed, he started smiling more often. He even let me sit on his lap while he worked, talking about company projects with his subordinates as if I wasn't an outsider at all. Every time I tried to get up, Lucas would pull me back down. After repeating this a few times, I started to notice the change. Something in his gaze grew darker, heavier, enough to make me tremble. I couldn't help but wonder, was this kind of money really something an ordinary person could earn? Even machines need oil breaks, don't they? While I was lost in thought, Lucas shut down the computer and reached for me, clearly planning to carry me to the bedroom. I hurriedly pressed my hand against his, trying to stop him. Lucas clearly misunderstood. You want to stay here? He hesitated for just a second before sweeping the documents off the desk and leaning over me. If it's uncomfortable, just tell me, he said lightly. We'll go back to the bedroom. Can I just go home instead? After a month of this, both my body and mind were pushed to the limit. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out the medical report my uncle had prepared beforehand. When Lucas saw it, he froze for a second, then slowly smiled. Show me. As Lucas looked through the report, the butler stood nearby. He glanced at the report briefly, and his brow furrowed. You should have told me something this important beforehand, he scolded. Going out alone like that is dangerous. I went alone because I didn't want to be followed, I muttered. The butler didn't let it go. For Mr. Sue and the baby's health, he said stiffly, it would be safer to get a full checkup at a top hospital. He was just as annoying as the first day I met him. My teeth itched with frustration. Lucas leaned back on the table, tapping his chin thoughtfully. A few seconds later, he lifted his eyes and looked at me. Seeing the faint smile on his lips, I gathered my courage. I walked over, tugged gently on his sleeve, and softened my voice deliberately. I just went today. I really don't want to go again. I hate the smell there. All right, Lucas said easily. After that, he started spending more time at home. He'd come back around noon every day, and before long, he began working from home entirely, never leaving the house. It was a little suffocating, but he gave me everything I asked for. And with that kind of treatment, I started getting a little too comfortable, bossing him around like he was my personal assistant. I want to drink this. Okay. Actually, I don't want this anymore. Give me something else. After a few days of this, instead of feeling guilty, I just felt trapped under his constant gaze. I want to go out for a walk. Maybe buy a few things I'll need later. Okay, I'll go with you. There's really no need for that. Truthfully, I just wanted to go out alone. He agreed quickly, but then I realized he'd forgotten one very important thing. He didn't give me any money. I couldn't bring myself to ask directly, so I just followed him around in my jacket. When he worked, I paced near his desk. When he went to the bathroom, I waited outside. When he got a drink of water, I trailed him to the kitchen. When he still didn't react, I finally turned my empty pockets inside out and let them swing at my sides. That finally got his attention. He stopped what he was doing and looked at me. Do you want me to fix your pockets? He asked. Then he walked over with a soft laugh, bent down, and straightened my pockets and the half-zipped zipper on my jacket. All done. His eyes sparkled, waiting for praise like a proud dog. I hesitated for a second before mumbling. No, I meant, for paying, you know, the bill. Lucas's smile widened slowly. After I got Lucas's card, I started going out shopping every other day. Ever since I announced the pregnancy, Lucas hadn't touched me. He'd been almost too proper, barely even holding my hand. At my insistence, he'd even moved into the guest bedroom next door. That left me alone on the big bed in the master bedroom, sleeping like a rock every night. That evening, as usual, I came home from the mall with several shopping bags. After a shower, I collapsed onto the bed. Maybe it was the amount of coffee I'd had that afternoon. My body was exhausted, but my mind was crystal clear. I lay there for a long time, unable to fall asleep. At around 1 in the morning, I heard the soft, sharp click of a door opening. Every hair on my body stood up. I froze under the covers, not daring to move. The footsteps drew closer. Through the thin strip of light spilling in from the window, I saw his face. Lucas. The tension in my chest loosened a little, but something still felt off. Why would Lucas come over this late? He wouldn't come to lecture me for spending too much, would he? He moved lightly, lifting a corner of the blanket and slipping in behind me. His arm wrapped around me, and he let out a quiet sigh against my back. In that moment, I felt ridiculously grateful to be a beta. If I were an omega, I would have been overwhelmed by his pheromones, and my fake sleeping act would have fallen apart in seconds. And after that, I didn't even want to imagine what would happen. But it didn't stop there. Within minutes, Lucas started tugging gently at my pajama top. Not just tugging, he began unbuttoning it, one by one. By the time there was nothing left between us, he pressed down on my stiff shoulders, turning me over to face him. Then he slid fully under the blanket. Seriously? A complete maniac. I'd thought pregnancy meant I could finally have some peace. Apparently, that was nothing but wishful thinking. Lucas was far more restless than I'd imagined. At first, it was only at night. He'd touch, tease, let his hands wander, and I tried to just endure it. But as time went on, Lucas couldn't even leave me alone at mealtimes. I looked at the spoon he was pushing toward my mouth and turned my head in resistance, trying to slip out of his arms. But the more I struggled, the tighter he held me. Then I felt it. A faint, unmistakable shift against me. My whole body went still. Try moving again, Lucas murmured, voice low. The tips of his ears were flushed, his breathing uneven, and the way he looked at me sent a shiver racing down my spine. I couldn't drag this out any longer. I had to get out. I started paying close attention to Lucas's work schedule. From 9 to noon after breakfast, he was at his busiest, locked up in the study. The nosy butler never came upstairs during that time. And between 10 and 12, the housekeepers were always in the kitchen preparing lunch. With the timing figured out, I contacted my uncle in secret. We made a plan to run away the following Tuesday. The morning of the escape, I strapped my luxury shopping bags to my back, climbed over the second-floor balcony railing, and jumped. I avoided the surveillance cameras on the path, and dove straight into the rickety tricycle waiting outside the gated community. My uncle spotted me, flicked his cigarette to the ground, gripped the handlebars, and hit the gas. The safest place is often the most unexpected one. So instead of fleeing to another city, I picked a remote mountain village to disappear. The area was isolated and hard to access. According to the locals, my uncle and I were the first outsiders in years to rent a house there. That gave me the confidence to settle in and lie low for a few years. I'd already paid off most of the debt with the deposit Lucas had given me. What little remained was enough for my uncle and me to live comfortably for quite a while. 2 months slipped by just like that. Every day was filled with good food and nothing else. My belly had grown softer, a small ring of flesh settling around my waist. After cleaning up the dishes, I sprawled out on the bed, bored out of my mind. The village was nice, but there was nothing to do. The Wi-Fi signal was weak most of the time. A while back, I'd tried downloading a game, but the internet kept cutting out. I picked up my phone again and gave it another shot. This time, the connection held. I tapped match. While waiting, a system notification popped up. People you may know. I scanned the list, but none of the names rang a bell. Whatever. Playing alone or with someone else didn't make a difference. I randomly invited one of them. The person accepted almost instantly. I turned on my mic, ready to get friendly with my new teammate. Hey, man, what role do you play? I asked. The other side didn't talk, but responded quickly through text. After half a day of playing together, I'd already grown unexpectedly fond of this polite, skilled stranger who didn't mind me talking too much. I added him as a friend. Over the next few days, we teamed up at the same time every day. Eventually, I asked for his number. It'd make things easier. He didn't hesitate at all. A string of numbers popped up on my screen. I added him, and something about that number nagged at me. It felt familiar. A shadow of someone's face began to surface in my mind. After a long silence, I typed carefully, "Hey, are you, by any chance?" A smiley face popped up on the screen, followed by 2 words that made my blood run cold. Lucas. We added each other as friends in the morning. By noon, Lucas had already found me. The ride back was suffocating. The 2 alpha bodyguards sitting in the front seat had gone pale, which said everything about the pressure of Lucas's pheromones. A half-transparent divider rose between the back seat and the driver. I'd already been terrified, but that sight made my skin crawl. Lucas looked straight at me, his eyes cold enough to freeze the air. "Why did you run? I've been looking for you for so long," he continued, voice steady but with something heavy beneath it. "I gave you a place to live, 3 meals a day, everything you ever wanted." Then he fell silent. I couldn't tell whether he was furious or hurt. Even the air itself seemed to hold its breath. I could hear the strangeness hidden in his words, but this was no time to analyze anything. I swallowed and forced out a shaky laugh. I was just messing with you. Lucas let out a quiet, sharp laugh. That night, things blurred together. His chin rested against my shoulder as he bit lightly at my ear and whispered, "Why are you crying? I'm just messing with you too." Maybe because of the child inside me, Lucas didn't go too far. He cleaned me up after, and for the first time in months, his temper seemed to ease. In the bathtub, he held my hand, running his fingers over the rough calluses on my palm. "You really don't remember me?" he asked softly. That was the same question he'd asked the very first time we met. I searched every corner of my memory. Nothing. Not a trace of him. Lucas sighed, water rippling around us. "Do you remember, when you were little, your family arranged a marriage for you?" His words hit a faint, long-buried memory. "When I was 8, my parents brought home a boy 4 years younger than me. They pushed him into my arms, saying we were meant to be together one day. He was quiet, but pretty in that soft, gentle way. No matter what I did, he never got mad. I grew used to having him around. Every vacation, I'd beg my parents to invite him over. But we lost touch in middle school. That was the year everything fell apart. My family went bankrupt, massive debts, over 10 million. We had to sell everything. I dropped out of my overseas school and transferred to an ordinary one. Even then, it wasn't enough. My parents worked themselves to the bone for years, but the debt lingered. And when they passed away a few years ago, I was the only one left. I tried to find you after that," Lucas said quietly. "I asked my family to help. They searched for a long time, then told me your family had moved away, that there was no way to reach you." His gaze darkened. "Later, I found out the truth. They just cut ties the moment your family fell." His voice turned colder, sharper. "Even though your parents had helped mine so much." He pulled me into his arms, and I couldn't tell whether the wetness on my shoulder came from the water or his tears. A flood of emotions crashed over me. Sadness, shock, and a strange, almost guilty warmth. We stayed like that until the water cooled. I finally turned around in the tub and brushed a finger under his reddened eyes. Then a thought hit me. "Wait a second. Hold on," I whispered. "I remember, the person I was supposed to marry was an Omega." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "And weren't you supposed to be an Alpha?" "I was, at first, but years of malnutrition and exhaustion had stalled my secondary gender. My glands had atrophied. I'd ended up as a Beta. I differentiated at 17, Lucas said. "Alpha. Turns out the first diagnosis was wrong." He gave a wry smile. "Back then I even worried about how two alphas would live together. I guess that's not a problem anymore." When his hands started to wander again, I punched him lightly in the chest. "If you wanted to find me, you could have contacted me directly." I snapped. "Do you know how much the middleman took?" Uncle had taken 20% of the deposit Lucas gave him. Just thinking about it made my wallet ache. Lucas caught my hand, massaging it gently where I'd hit him. "I couldn't reach you," he said simply. I froze. He was right. I'd changed all my phone numbers back then. Old plans were too expensive. I hesitated, then asked, "Then, you knew I was a Beta from the start? You knew I couldn't have a child?" Lucas's hand paused. Then he pressed his palm against my belly, rubbing slowly, meaningfully. "You became a Beta later," he murmured. "So it's not impossible." His smile was quiet, but dangerous. "We'll just have to try a little harder." I couldn't live off him forever. I wasn't built for that kind of life. After a few lazy days together, I started looking for work. With Lucas's funding, my uncle had opened a small garage. Business was decent. He kept asking me to help out there. Lucas noticed my hesitation and leaned in. "Why don't you come work at my company?" That was impossible. With my lack of education or status, everyone would make assumptions. Seeing me waver, Lucas smiled faintly and pulled out a booklet from nowhere. A school brochure. "Then how about going back to school?" he suggested. My heart skipped a beat. You don't need to worry about anything," he cut me off. "It's only natural for a company to train its people." His eyes softened, his voice turning low and warm. "All you need to do is bring your grades up. I really want to see you working beside me one day." He held my gaze. "I'll wait for you." Ever since I ran away, Lucas had been watching me like a hawk, tighter than before, like he was terrified I'd slip through his fingers again. One night, when I finally couldn't stand it anymore, I lifted my shirt and patted my slightly round belly. "Actually," I said seriously, "I didn't lie to you about that report. I'm about to give birth soon. So, we really shouldn't be sharing a bed right now." There wasn't a hint of a joke in my tone. Lucas stared at me, momentarily stunned. Then he reached out, touched my stomach gently, and nodded solemnly. "When's the due date?" he asked. I threw out a random date. A week from now. Lucas accepted it without question. For the next several days, he didn't lay a finger on me and even moved obediently into the guest room. Those few days were bliss. Peaceful. Quiet. I almost forgot what it felt like to breathe without pressure. Then the so-called due date arrived, and it was Lucas himself who reminded me. That night, he offered, I should sleep next to you, just in case anything happens. I shook my head, full of righteous determination. No need. I can handle it myself. I locked the bedroom door behind me and slept like a baby until the sun came up. When I opened the door the next morning, the sight that greeted me made me freeze. Lucas was sitting on the floor outside the room. His hair was messy, his face pale, and the dark circles under his eyes were impossible to miss. He hadn't slept a wink. Morning, he said, looking up at me with that unreadable half-smile. He caught my wrist gently, leaned to look past me, and asked, "Where's the baby?" I curled the corners of my lips into the purest, most innocent smile I could muster. "Daddy." Lucas actually laughed. Not the cold kind this time, but soft, amused. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me gently back into the room. "Not now," he murmured against my ear. "Say it properly for me later."